There's a quiet kind of strength we rarely talk about. It's not loud, it doesn't scream, it doesn't pose, it doesn't perform, it just is. The strongest people, the truly strong, aren't the ones who shout their emotions for the world to hear. They're the ones who feel everything and show nothing. Let me be clear, this isn't about pretending to be okay. It's not about bottling things up or becoming numb. It's about mastery. Strength is often misunderstood. We see people who don't cry, who don't flinch, who keep going no matter what, and we call them strong. We assume that strength means not feeling, that it means being emotionally detached, invincible, unshaken by what life throws at you. But that's not true strength. That's just suppression, and sometimes even fear. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who feel less. They're the ones who feel everything and choose to master it. Real strength begins with awareness, emotional awareness, the ability to recognize what you're feeling, even when that feeling is uncomfortable. It's being honest with yourself about your anger, your sadness, your insecurity, your fear. But instead of running from it or being consumed by it, you sit with it, you study it, you ask, why do I feel this way? What's this trying to teach me? You don't push it down. You don't lash it out. You own it. That's emotional mastery. It's not the absence of emotion. It's the willingness to face your emotions without letting them control your decisions. It's the discipline to hold your tongue when every part of you wants to speak out of frustration. It's the patience to take a breath instead of making a bad situation worse. It's the self-respect to walk away from things that trigger the worst in you, not because you're afraid, but because you know you deserve better. We live in a world that glamorizes control in the wrong way. Don't show emotion. Be cold, be hard, be untouchable. But that's not control. That's fear of being vulnerable. True control is knowing you could explode, but you don't. Knowing you could break down, but you hold it together because someone needs you to be strong in that moment. It's choosing grace when you've been wronged. Choosing silence when you could easily destroy. Choosing calm when everything inside you is in chaos. It's important to understand that strength and sensitivity can and do coexist. In fact, the strongest people are often the most sensitive. They notice the energy in the room. They can feel when something is off. They carry the emotions of others because they care deeply. But they've trained themselves to not be ruled by that. They don't let other people's storms pull them under. They acknowledge their emotions, honor them, but don't let them drive the ship. And that kind of strength isn't built overnight. It's built in the hard moments. The arguments you chose to walk away from, the tears you wiped privately when no one was watching, the forgiveness you gave when you had every right to stay angry. It's built in the quiet self-talk you give yourself when anxiety creeps in the stillness you create inside, even when the outside world is loud and chaotic. People often think strong people don't struggle. The truth is, they struggle more than most. They just don't broadcast it. They've simply learned to fight their battles in the dark so they can show up in the light. They've learned that not every emotion needs an audience. Not every feeling needs to be acted on. And not every storm requires a reaction. So if you're someone who feels deeply, who wrestles with your thoughts, who navigates intense emotions every day, and still shows up, still chooses love, still keeps your peace, you are strong, not because you're unaffected, but because you've chosen to be intentional. You've chosen mastery. And in a world that's constantly reacting, constantly shouting, constantly collapsing under pressure, that kind of strength is rare and it's powerful. Stillness is often misunderstood. In a world that moves fast, where noise is constant and chaos is normalized, stillness is mistaken for weakness, for emptiness, for someone who has nothing to say or nothing to feel. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Stillness is not a void. It's not a lack of emotion, thought, or intensity. It's the deliberate choice to create space within, even when everything outside is pulling you in different directions. Stillness is power under control. It's presence without the need to perform. It's not about being passive or indifferent. It's about being so deeply rooted in who you are that the world can spin around you and you don't lose your balance. Stillness doesn't come from not feeling. It comes from feeling so much, so deeply, that you've had to learn how to contain it, manage it, and respond with intention rather than reaction. You see, a still person isn't someone who's disconnected. They're not cold. In fact, stillness often belongs to those who are most in tune with themselves, with others, with the world. They don't react to every provocation because they understand the cost of unnecessary conflict. They don't explain themselves endlessly because they no longer need to be understood by everyone. They've stopped chasing validation because they found peace in their own presence. Stillness is not the absence of thought, it's clarity. It's not the absence of emotion, it's emotional regulation. It's not numbness, it's awareness without overwhelm. It's choosing not to let every impulse dictate your actions. It's resisting the urge to constantly prove, defend, or announce your feelings to the world. It's knowing what you carry and choosing how, when, and if to express it. Think about the strongest people you know. Many of them are quiet, observant, measured. Not because they lack passion, but because they've learned that passion without direction burns everything in its path. They know that true influence often comes in whispers, not in shouts. Their stillness makes others listen more closely. It commands attention not by demanding it, but by earning it through presence, through grace, through consistent calm in the face of chaos. Stillness is also about restraint. Not everything needs a reaction. Not every insult requires a comeback. Not every challenge needs to be met with aggression. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to do nothing at all, at least in that moment. To pause, to breathe, to let things unfold and allow space for clarity. That's not emptiness, that's wisdom in motion. There is a quiet strength in people who don't speak unless it's necessary. In those who don't rush to defend themselves because they're not living for other people's opinions. In those who can sit in silence without fidgeting, without reaching for a distraction, without needing to escape their own company. These are people who have met themselves fully and accepted what they found. Stillness isn't something we're born with. It's cultivated. It's earned through trials, through heartbreak, through countless moments of emotional chaos where you realize reacting isn't always the answer. It's built in therapy sessions, in long walks, in quiet nights alone when the world felt heavy, but you refused to let it crush you. It's in the journal pages, in the meditations, in the prayers, in the hard conversations where you chose patience over pride. So no, stillness doesn't mean emptiness, it means fullness under control. It means a deep reservoir of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. It means you found a way to carry the weight of life without letting it show on your face. And in a world that glorifies noise and speed, stillness is not only rare, it's revolutionary. There's a difference between reacting and responding, and the strongest people know the power in choosing the latter. They've learned, often the hard way, that acting on impulse can damage relationships, ruin opportunities, and create chaos that didn't need to exist. So instead of projecting what they feel the moment they feel it, they take a different route. They pause. They reflect, they process. That's not avoidance. It's maturity, it's leadership of self. When someone says something hurtful or does something disrespectful, most people instinctively react. They lash out, they defend, they match the energy. But the strongest individuals, they don't hand over their peace so easily. They've built an inner system that stops them from acting on the first emotional wave that hits. They ask themselves key questions. Why did that trigger me? Is my response going to bring clarity or more conflict? They don't run from emotion, they study it. Processing before projecting isn't about denying emotions. It's not about pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about creating space between the emotion and the reaction. That space is where emotional intelligence lives. That's where wisdom grows. It's the moment where you get to choose. Do I let this emotion speak for me, or do I speak for myself? Strong people take that moment seriously because they've been on the other side of impulsive reactions. They know how words said in anger can echo long after the heat fades. They've seen how unprocessed emotions can poison situations that could have been handled with grace. And more than anything, they've seen how projecting unhealed pain onto others can become a cycle, one that spreads negativity instead of breaking it. Processing means sitting with your feelings. It means being honest enough to say I'm hurt or I'm angry, and then going a level deeper. What's really behind this? Am I feeling ignored, unseen, disrespected? And when they understand the why behind the emotion, they gain control over how to respond. They respond with intention instead of reaction. with clarity instead of confusion, with purpose instead of pain. People who project don't always realize they're doing it. They think they're expressing themselves. They think they're standing up for what they feel. But more often than not, they're handing their emotional state to someone else and saying, you deal with it. The strongest people don't do that. They take responsibility. They know their emotions are theirs to manage, not someone else's burden to carry. This self-restraint doesn't come from ego. It comes from self-awareness. It's not about being right or looking composed. It's about knowing that when you master yourself, you protect your peace and the peace of those around you. That's leadership. That's integrity. That's strength. In every interaction, we have a choice. We can react from our wounds or we can respond from our wisdom. The strong choose the latter. They don't let anger dictate their voice. They don't let insecurity shape their behavior. They don't let fear make their decisions. They slow down. They reflect. They own what they feel before sharing it with the world. So when you see someone who seems calm in the face of chaos, it's not because they don't feel anything. It's because they've already done the inner work. They felt it, named it, processed it, and then decided what's worth expressing and what's better left unsaid. That kind of discipline takes practice. That kind of self-control takes strength. And in a world full of emotional noise, those who process before they project are the ones who truly lead. Empathy is one of the most powerful traits a person can possess. It's the ability to feel what others feel, to step into someone else's world without judgment, to understand pain you may have never personally experienced. But there's a quiet form of empathy that often goes unnoticed, a kind that doesn't demand attention, doesn't seek praise, and doesn't require putting your own emotions on display. It's empathy without exposure. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are deeply empathetic. They can walk into a room and sense the mood before a word is spoken. They notice the subtle changes in someone's voice, the shift in someone's energy, the story behind someone's silence. They feel everything. But they don't always show it. Not because they're hiding, but because they've learned how to hold space for others without making it about themselves. Empathy without exposure means being there for someone without shifting the spotlight. It's listening without needing to share your own story in return. It's offering comfort without making the moment about your emotions. It's being able to say, I feel you, without saying much at all. That kind of empathy is rare. It requires emotional maturity and a level of internal security that doesn't need validation for caring. In today's world, vulnerability is often equated with openness, complete openness. We are told to share everything, to be transparent, to express ourselves loudly and often. And while vulnerability is immense value, it becomes problematic when it turns into emotional oversharing. Not all empathy needs to be externalized. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is hold our empathy quietly, gently, without turning it into a performance. There's strength in being able to feel someone's pain and not needing to say, I know exactly how you feel, especially when you don't. There's wisdom in being able to sit in silence with someone, to let them cry or vent or grieve without rushing to compare or fix. It's about presence, not performance, support, not spotlight. That's the essence of empathy without exposure. This form of empathy is especially powerful in leadership, in parenting, in friendships, any space where trust is essential. When someone knows you understand them without needing you to constantly explain it, they feel safe. When your compassion isn't conditional on attention or recognition, people know your support is real. Quiet empathy builds deep connection, not because it's loud, but because it's honest. Let's be clear. Empathy without exposure doesn't mean shutting down your emotions. It means you've done the inner work to know when your feelings are relevant to the moment and when they're not. It means you can empathize without emotionally bleeding onto someone who's already hurting. You're not cold, you're contained. You're not disconnected, you're grounded. Many of the strongest, most empathetic people walk through the world carrying a lot more than they show. They've trained themselves to be safe spaces for others. They've learned to process their own emotions in private so they can be present for others in public. That takes strength. That takes emotional discipline. That takes heart. So don't mistake someone's calm presence for a lack of care. Don't assume someone isn't empathetic just because they don't cry when you cry. Some people are feeling everything, but they choose to support rather than spotlight. They choose stillness over sympathy seeking. They give without needing to be seen giving. That's what empathy without exposure looks like. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's one of the most powerful forms of human connection you'll ever experience. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices and the most visible emotions, there's something deeply powerful about those who choose not to perform their pain. We've grown used to seeing struggle packaged for attention, online posts, dramatic monologues, public breakdowns. And while vulnerability is vital, there's a difference between expressing pain to heal and displaying it to be seen. Pain is real, it's raw, it doesn't need a stage. The strongest people have felt heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, failure. They felt it all, but instead of turning their wounds into a performance, they sit with them in private. They bleed in silence. They process in solitude. They've learned that not every bruise needs to be broadcast, and not every scar has to be shown to validate its existence. They know their pain is valid even if no one else sees it. There's a quiet dignity in people who suffer silently, not because they're trying to be martyrs, but because they've built the strength to carry themselves through dark times without leaning on external validation. They don't cry for likes or post their breakdowns for sympathy. They heal in the dark so they can stand strong in the light. That kind of strength is rare, and it's not glamorous, it's not flashy, but it's real. Choosing not to perform your pain doesn't mean you're avoiding it. It means you're facing it inwardly before bringing it outwardly. It means giving yourself the time to understand what you're feeling, what it means, and how it's shaping you before sharing it with the world. Strong people aren't afraid of vulnerability. They simply choose when and how to be vulnerable. They don't use pain to manipulate or gain attention. They use it to grow, to evolve, to deepen their understanding of themselves. There's also protection in privacy. When you expose your pain prematurely, you open yourself to judgment, misinterpretation, and criticism. The strongest people know that their healing journey is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. They don't share everything because they know not everyone is safe. Not everyone will handle their pain with care, so they choose wisely. They speak when they're ready. They open up when it's meaningful, not when it's trendy. This doesn't mean they don't talk. It doesn't mean they never ask for help. It simply means they don't perform. Their vulnerability is real, not rehearsed. When they speak about their pain, it's with intention, not for attention. It's to help someone else, or to connect on a deeper level, not to gain applause for surviving. They've separated their identity from their suffering. They don't need to be seen as struggling to feel seen as human. Ironically, these are the people others often misunderstand. People assume they're too strong, emotionless, or closed off. But what they don't realize is that these individuals are carrying more than anyone knows. They've chosen to bear the weight of their experiences privately, and that choice doesn't make them cold, it makes them courageous. Because it takes more strength to walk through pain alone than it does to parade it for approval. So if you're someone who's been through hell and chose to stay quiet, if you've cried behind closed doors and showed up the next day with a calm spirit and a quiet strength, know this: you are not weak for not showing it. You are strong for surviving it. You don't need an audience to validate your growth. You don't need applause to prove you've healed. Sometimes the loudest progress happens in silence, and that silence speaks volumes. The most powerful leaders aren't the ones who bark orders or demand attention. They're the ones who lead themselves first. Before they influence others, before they speak into the lives of a team, a family, a community, they've done the hard work of mastering their own thoughts, emotions, and actions. They don't expect others to follow where they haven't walked. They don't preach discipline they haven't practiced. Their leadership starts from within, and that's what gives it weight. Leading yourself means taking full responsibility for your energy, your reactions, your habits, and your mindset. It's waking up each day and choosing discipline even when no one is watching. It's holding yourself to a standard not because someone else will call you out if you don't, but because you've made a commitment to who you want to be. That kind of self-leadership is rare, especially in a world that's quick to blame and slow to take ownership. When you lead yourself first, you don't wait for the world to motivate you. You show up when you don't feel like it. You follow through on your promises to yourself. You keep going even when there's no applause. That's where real confidence is built, in the private victories, the ones no one else sees. Because if you can't lead yourself through resistance, discomfort, or uncertainty, you won't be able to lead others when the pressure hits. People often think leadership is about titles or authority, but some of the best leaders have no official role. They just move differently. They have clarity, integrity, consistency. They hold themselves accountable, which naturally earns the respect of those around them. You don't need to announce yourself as a leader when your actions already speak for you. That's what happens when you lead yourself first. And it also means emotional leadership. When things go wrong, you don't panic. When people frustrate you, you don't lash out. You regulate your responses, not because you're pretending, but because you've built a habit of not letting temporary emotions destroy permanent relationships. You process before you react. You reflect before you respond. That's not weakness. It's wisdom. Self-leadership also involves making decisions that align with your long-term vision, not your short-term comfort. It's saying no to what's easy so you can say yes to what matters. It's doing the work when no one's clapping. It's resting when you need to, not out of laziness, but out of respect for your limits. It's showing up with excellence because it's who you are, not because you're being judged. The truth is, you can't lead others well if you haven't led yourself first. Because eventually pressure exposes patterns. And if you haven't trained discipline, integrity, humility, and focus within yourself, no title or charisma will save you when it counts. Real leadership isn't just about inspiration, it's about demonstration. You show others what's possible by the way you live, not just by the words you say. And here's the paradox. The more you lead yourself, the less you have to convince others to follow. People are drawn to consistency. They trust stability. They follow clarity. And when they see someone who isn't ruled by emotions, who takes responsibility, who models the discipline they speak of, they follow not out of obligation, but out of respect. So, if you want to lead in any area of life, your family, your business, your friendships, start with yourself. Build the habits. Face the hard truths. Own your growth. Your leadership begins long before anyone sees it. It begins in how you treat yourself, how you manage your time, how you handle pressure, how you bounce back from setbacks. Because when you lead yourself first, everything else follows.